Hey, nonprofits, it's Trevor Nelson. Here's a great episode I had the good fortune of doing with our friend Rob Burke from Donor Doc on his podcast, The Fundraising Lab. Really cool episode. Got to share about 20, 25 minutes. I got on my soapbox a few times, but it was really, really good. I'm very grateful for Rob and his team and the Fundraising Lab podcast for having us on. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let us know if you did. Do us a favor, share this episode with someone in your network. If they get any value out of it, it'd be awesome. And enjoy the show.
Welcome to The Focus Fundraiser, where we discuss how to focus on the right fundraising practices, because we believe that doing more shouldn't be the goal. Doing what matters most should be. And today I am excited to bring Trevor Nelson on board here to talk about all things fundraising and events. Trevor is the co-founder of HGA Fundraising and also the host of his very own podcast, Hey Nonprofits, so go check that out as well if you're listening. Trevor, your company, HGA, you guys have helped raise millions through smarter event management and design. I'm excited to pick your brain and get free advice for these fundraisers. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for having me, Rob. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you bet. So let's start off. Give us a little bit about your background.
Tripped and fell into a space that we identified needed help and needed encouragement and needed coaching a handful of years ago. And we started this company, my best friend and business partner, Jason. We built this beautiful family business, and there's 21 of us now, and we'll be in 2,000 events helping folks this year alone, 2025 alone. So pretty enthralled with what we've been able to create and do. And we started with providing the most profitable auction items in fundraising for folks, live auction, silent auction. That's where we identified the original need in the space. And it's become more, coming back to the encouragement and coaching pieces, becoming more about us quadrupling down on, providing sound education tools and, a weekly webinar, the podcast, and having these conversations with folks like yourself and whoever's listening. This space needs to be served, the event space in particular. And we definitely color outside the lines, folks, and have gotten to know some very, very thoughtful folks that really don't work in events and what have you. And it's all, molding this beautiful family business and this beautiful work that we get to do on a daily basis. And yeah, so that's a long answer to a short question, but
No, it's good.
Yeah.
How did you stumble? So you got into the auction side. What brought you into that space?
Yeah, so I had a hospitality background, and I had already and I didn't know. I had no idea. In like say 2016, 2017, for instance, when I first started really understanding fundraising, I had no idea that there were items like ours, for instance, even being offered. For live auction, silent auction, online auction purposes, drawings, and things of that nature, just as fundraising tools. I had no idea. And so it's blissful, actually, that I had no idea. So I could look at it, from a clear, set of eyes, with no preconceived notions. And I'm very competitive. And I thought that we, could set out and do it better than most. We believe in our products, and we've developed all of our products ourselves. And so, yeah, I just, once again, had a background in the hospitality space and found out that there was a deep fundraising rabbit hole, and we still don't know how deep it goes.
Yeah. So you guys work with thousands of events every year. So you've got a really big data pool to have an opinion from. So I'm curious to know, is there a most common preventable mistake that you see organizations repeating in their events that they could learn from you on?
God, that changes over time, but most preventable, I think it was like, honestly, I just like recency bias would dictate that we were just having this conversation with a really, really brilliant fundraiser yesterday, as a matter of fact, that, you don't have to have 500 people in your room to raise the most amount of money that you can. You know what I mean? Like sometimes less is more, and making and being more deliberate about having the right people in the room and the right opportunities to give and things of that nature. So I see folks making some mistakes, overthinking the size of the event and not understanding how much it costs, to put a plate of food in front of somebody and things of that nature. And it's reframing it as, okay, very, very deliberate, very, very focused, very intentional. This is a fundraiser. We need to have, very, very, understandable mechanics is that how many folks we need to have in the room and the right people in the room and asking them in the right way, and inviting them to give in the right way. So I think that's just, like I said, just a more recent conversation we had. So that's one that popped in my mind first.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a discussion we've been having here as well. Of we just had a webinar on micro events versus macro events, like big events versus small, and so we've been having that discussion too. Of we're seeing more intimate groups be more impactful, where it's what, how do you define an event? Is it just the gala, or is it also inviting your major donors into seeing what you're actually doing and having them volunteer for an afternoon and making that an event, right? So I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this. It sounds like you agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that framework. I love that question just in general. Yeah. I think it's an exercise. And listen, fundraising is not getting easier. It's actually getting harder. But from an encouraging standpoint, I think the best way to look at it is, you just said, major event, micro event, major donors, volunteering, all those things. And what that says to me is that fundraising is an and game, not an or game. So I think another, backtracking that original question too, is like another big mistake that we can make is thinking it has to be one thing. It's this or that. In our world, it's like, fund a need or the live auction, or, you know what I mean? Or it's like revenue enhancers or the, no, no, no. It's fundraising is an and game. It's not just a relationships business, obviously, right? It's an and game, not an or game. So I'm a big fan of both, right? Not overextending yourself to have the big gala, for the sake of the micro event, for instance, but being very, very intentional and focused with both, because you can do both, actually. That's the thing. You can do all of these things, and they all push you, in your organization in the right direction. I just think, like I said, I'm very, very opinionated about fundraising being an and practice, not an or practice.
I'm jumping ahead a bit because I usually talk about burnout ask you about your opinion on burnout towards the end of the podcast, but I think this is a good discussion to have here too, which is how do we embrace the and, because I agree with you, it doesn't have to be one or the other, but how do we embrace the and, but without making events the cause of burnout for these fundraisers that are the ED that has all the hats, and events are a big lift. And so how do they make sure that they're not burning out and they're focusing on the right types of events and not trying to do it all?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very hot topic. It will not go away, because once again, fundraising is just getting harder and not more complicated necessarily. But this is an interesting time that we're living. It's the greatest time ever to be alive, I think, and the most opportunity. However, it comes with work, right? With responsibility and things. And how do we avoid burnout? Well, number one, and of course, someone could say, well, we're three people, right? I get it. Realizing that you don't have to do this alone, I think, is really massive. Realizing that you need to protect, your sanity, and I like a few years ago, I started writing these rules about, starting a company and things like that. And it was like really interesting how the cross section between starting your own company and running a nonprofit. And my first rule was like, be kind to everyone, duh, especially yourself. Right? Because you cannot give what you do not have, was my first rule. You never know who you're talking to. Be kind to everybody. But, once again, that's the, I hope it doesn't sound cliche by talking about protecting yourself and being kind to yourself and making sure you're right. Yeah, but as I mentioned as well, this space needs to be served, because folks that are doing events and the EDs, the CEOs and what have you, dev team, they're wearing 14 hats, to put on 14 different hats. So, realizing you don't have to do it alone, being very, very deliberate about who you surround yourself with and who you choose to get involved. This is a relationships business. This is a people exercise. The whole fundraising piece, the whole, the event piece, everything that we do is predicated on people, right? And there's a famous line that a friend of ours said, her name's Alexandra Katzenstein, and she said, I didn't have time to focus on the money, so I focused on the people, because when I focused on the people, the money was there. So realizing that you don't have to do this alone, realizing that if you, speak well about your mission to anyone that will listen, you can recruit people, right? You can recruit the right people to help. And yeah, easier said than done, but I see it daily, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's gold. I love that. That's such a good saying or quote from her. And
Yeah.
I think you probably just answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyways in case you have another take on this. How do you feel like events play into the donor retention piece of it? Because fundraising is getting harder. There, we keep seeing stats around there are less and less donors, but larger donors, and so the retention rate needs to be higher if we're going to keep those. How do events play into that stewardship piece?
Massively. I think people give to people they like. Right. I think that, so having an event, I think, is massive. I think people are craving that. I don't think that I know that. It's going to become increasingly more evident 2026 and beyond. People want to be around people that are like-minded, and be around organizations and people that run those organizations that they believe in. Another line I'll steal from another brilliant fundraiser that came on our webinar and podcast before: your greatest prospect list is the event you just had. And we always say, if you don't know what to say or you don't know where to start with thank you. You'll never go wrong. You don't have to ask folks for money right away. Of course, as a matter of fact, we advise not to do that, but invite them to get to know you better, to get to know your organization better, and above all else, thank them. So I think that's how events play that, among so many other things, but we can go on for 90 minutes about that. But I think you get my point.
Yeah, agreed. I think events is we look at stewardship as this cyclical thing. It's not a linear path of a donor journey. It's how do you continuously re-engage them and steward them? And so events is a big piece of that flywheel. And so how you show up at the event matters, but like you said, what you do afterwards, it's just like what you do after the gift. What you do after the event is just as important as the event itself.
Yeah, making sure your messaging is on point. Just, double clicking on that, right? Just making sure your messaging is on point, and you figure that out, before you even open the doors, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So we're coming up on end of year. Fundraisers are focused on end of year. Giving Tuesday is next Tuesday, so their heads down, but 2026 is just over the horizon, and it's a clean slate to try new things or adjust what they're doing. I'm curious to know from your perspective, you guys are, you're helping with thousands of events. What are you seeing that seems to be really successful right now? And I know you're biased about auctions, so you can talk about inside the auctions or just
Yeah.
event types, but I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I really love, once again, it's recency bias that will predicate my answer, Rob. It's just, I'm seeing, of course, we're, auctions, events, having folks, gather in person. I love what you said about micro events and galas. Yes, once again, I think that's really going to be an important piece. I think having very, very deliberate ways for folks that are in attendance to give. Recency bias, once again, it's like we had a great guest on that said, stop nickel and diming people, right? Like, stop nickel. Everyone knows why they're there at your event. So, just be, if you gave them 3 giving opportunities, but it was $25, $50, and $100, well, they gave $175 and they gave 3 times. They probably thought, let alone the ticket or whatever, even if they were invited, especially if they're a new attendee or, a new supporter or someone who's interested about your organization, don't nickel and dime them as well. People know why they're at your event, and they know that they're there to support something, and make sure that they're aware of that. Make sure that people that invite them, make them aware of that, right? And lean on people. I think that, you heard me just say, like, if you don't know what to say thank you. I think folks in development, no matter where they are actually in the their fundraising journey, or just in the fundraising universe, I think people are just like really, really afraid just to let, like honesty dictate the path. Like, this is why you're here. We're raising X. This is, it costs this much to send a kid with cancer to camp. It's like, this is how many kids we want to send. We know you're here. How many kids would you like to send? Can we invite you? It's like, I just think that we're afraid, I think, as fundraisers sometimes, to just engage folks thoughtfully and just lay it all out there. And differentiation, I like to say, is stronger than competition. And if your messaging and the way you approach people and the way you invite them is different than the shop down the street, that will bode very, very well for you. That will bode very, very well for your organization, your mission. That is a true differentiator. And you're talking about 2026. If you can differentiate in how you make people feel and how thoughtful you are when you engage with people, they're going to remember that. And people give to people they like. right? So people want to be around people that they like. People are, I like to say, I'm allergic to a bad hang. I don't want to be around people I don't want to be around. People don't want to give to people that they don't like. Make people like you. This is where this is a relationships game. At the end of the day, we're just trying to make friends. But you lay it all out there. Don't be afraid to tell folks exactly what you're doing. And I think good things will follow. I think we overcomplicate it.
That's very good advice.
You
Good.
got me ranting. Sorry, man.
I love it. We're getting
Yeah,
honest here, and I think it's important to talk about, right? Because it's easy to beat around the bush and thank them before they even give, but it's like you got to make that ask. Like that's what they're there for. They want to be a part of what your impact is, and so invite them into it and be confident in what you need and ask them for it. What's the worst that can happen? They only give you half of what you need. Now you have half of what you need, right? So
exactly. There's no
can't,
rules. Yeah,
yeah,
there's no rules. Yeah, half is great. Right.
right.
Like you said. But people are afraid. I mean, I understand the trepidation. I understand the fear that surrounds asking people for money. So like I said, you just said it yourself. Invite. That's a different framework. You can
Yeah,
operate from there, you know?
100%.
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's a really good mindset around events and making the ask. Are there any other like common misconceptions that you often see nonprofit leaders have around events, like how they approach success in event, perhaps?
Common misconception is a bunch of people talking about that you don't have to have them. Like we were
Mm, yeah.
like that you don't have to have people gather. Like I've heard some of the most thoughtful people I've ever listened to say amazing, amazing things about fundraising and people, and there's no more uncomfortable or comfortable problems to solve. They're all uncomfortable. Like awareness isn't enough. People are aware. Like we get it. Like all these things, and then someone will turn around and say, "You don't need events. You just need this." It's like, okay, yeah, and I understand it's frothy to say that they're expensive. I get that. Have you thought about engaging, because typically it'll come from like a major gifts officer, right? For instance. And I love major gifts officers. I'm friends with a lot of them, right? Like lovely people, right? Okay. And doing great work, but it's like, you don't need an event. You need major gifts. Okay. Well, where are you going to find these major givers? And how do they just immediately become major givers? And then that event you're talking about is so expensive, but have you ever thought about engaging a major giver to be a supporter, underwriter, sponsor of an event? We're pushing the envelope on like, okay, well, you can underwrite and sponsor anything. We've got clients that have the bathroom sponsored by plumbing companies. We've got a famous product called the Golden Ticket, and we have the Golden Ticket sponsored by supporters. And I think a common misconception is to think that you don't need to expose folks to your organization and gather. I think that's a common misconception because as human beings, our world is predicated on that. And as I've mentioned like 5 times, people want to be around people they believe in, and people want to give to people they trust. How are they going to trust you if they don't get to know you? That kind of thing. So I think that's a very common misconception. Sorry to get on the soapbox, but like I said, I think it's very frothy to go, oh, the events, you don't need a gala, you just need this. The events, well, let's stop calling it a gala then. I don't care. Fine. That's great. But have people gather and thank them and shake their hand and look them in the eye and show them the work and get them the heck out of there quick if you want. Like all those things, but be focused and intentional about it, and good things will happen.
And budgets are a very real thing, especially moving into just the space that we're in. So what does it mean to like kind of what we talked about earlier with micro events or smaller events? What does it mean to redefine what an event is? Because I 100% agree with you. When
Yeah.
it's frothy to talk about not needing events, but maybe it's not needing the gala, but it's getting those major donors or inviting them into a breakfast that costs half as much, or bringing them to the shelter and actually showing them and doing a dinner there at the shelter where they're sitting down with the homeless or whatever that is. Like those are
Yes.
events as well, right? It doesn't have to be a gallows.
Or share the cost with another housing organization
Yeah.
down the way and
Yeah.
collaborate. There's no obviously M&A in our world, but there's also not a lot of collaboration amongst organizations. So you can share costs. You can, hey, they did a really cool thing, and this restaurant, or like you said, this venue, they want to expose people to their venue. I know venues that have events for free as just because it advertises the venue, right? It promotes the venue. And yes, I absolutely think that. And I think, another thing is opening up and sharpening your pencil and opening up to ideas from those people at the micro event or at the very, very thoughtful, gathering of 24 people at someone's home in someone's backyard, and find out what they want. What would tickle them? What would get them dressed up and, to come out on a Friday or Saturday evening, that kind of thing. Like, have a conversation. How do you do that? You can do that over the phone. You can do that over coffee. You can do that at a micro event. You can do all of those things. Once again, I am saying that it's getting harder because you have to do all those things. It's important.
I feel like we keep talking about this, but I always end on a takeaway that's very tactical. So
Mhm.
final question for you, Trevor. What is one thing that every fundraiser should do today that you believe matters most?
If someone's been good to you or your organization or both, and you think of them, send them a text message or call them. And if you don't know what to say, and I actually advise that you start this way, say thank you. That is a skill that is people are born with, that natural thoughtfulness and hospitality. And that is, if you're not born with it, that is also a skill that can be learned, that can be taught, that can be shared. My advice is, if someone's been good to you personally, your organization, or both, let them know that. I think it's different. I don't think a lot of people are probably doing that and banging down their door and sending them a bunch of text messages saying the same thing. But make sure that folks know that. And yeah, I think that you can time block that. You can do that 3 times a day. That can be part of your day-to-day activities. If someone's been good to you, someone's been good to your organization, let them know. No news is not good news.
I think that's fantastic advice to end on. Trevor, thank you so much for giving freely of your advice and the expertise that you guys have from your company. Appreciate you being on today.
Thanks for letting us share. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you.
Yeah, for those that are interested, I'm sure that they can connect with you on LinkedIn and talk more and hear
Love
more about
that.
HGA and
Yeah.
how you guys can help with their events and elevate them more. So you guys
Yeah,
go
we're
do
on
that.
LinkedIn all day. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. Yeah,
Connect with Trevor. And also, if you're curious about how DonorDoc can help you find that clarity, build a stronger donor base, help with the event management, you can visit us at donordoc.com to find out more. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, Rob.